My name is Mayflower, and I'm here today at the Norwich Museum of Art in Wichita, Kansas. I'm standing on a TED Talk stage that was created by artist Evan Roth as part of his exhibition, Intellectual Property Donor. I'm here today to talk to you guys about the stories we tell ourselves, and more specifically, the stories we tell ourselves about love, who we love and how we love. Now, as I said, my name is Amanda. I'm 29 years old, although I oftentimes only feel like I'm about 15. I'm an educator as well as an entertainer, and I hope to be able to entertain you guys today as I talk to you about love. But more than anything, I really just hope to get you thinking. So, love. I'd like to begin by talking about something called unrequited love. Unrequited love is love that is not returned. It's not reciprocated. And oftentimes, the object of your affection doesn't even know that you love them. It's a very painful kind of love, and it's a thing that really good poems read out of, I guess. Well, unrequited love exists in a world of fantasy. There's no reality to it other than the fact that the person you love is real. And that's a very dangerous thing, because when you live in a fantasy world and you love someone, but you can't tell them, the stories you tell yourself about your relationship with that person that doesn't even exist, they shape who you are. And they can really change your life, for better and for worse. So where did this all get started? I guess for me, it got started when I was in 4th grade, when I got my very first issue of Teen Beat magazine. Now, for those of you that do not know, Teen Beat magazine, Bop, All Stars, they're filled with celebrities, young, good-looking celebrities. For me, it was Jonathan Taylor Thomas. He was the apple of my eye. I remember sitting in Park Lane Shopping Center, and I didn't even go into the fabric store, which I love to do. I was so engrossed at looking at TV magazine. Now, I found this picture online, and I was really excited when I did, because one of the main functions of TV magazine was to give you all of these pages of color photos of celebrities. I had an entire wall dedicated to Jonathan Taylor Thomas when I was younger. I loved him so much, I'd even get pictures laminated sometimes, and a couple of times I had to put on the t-shirts, which I would probably wear around, hopefully just around the house, but I don't really remember. I blocked those memories out. Looking at the pictures in Teen Beat magazine, you could really learn a lot about a person. Like, for example, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, he loves kitty cats. He's also a huge basketball fan and used to go to LA Lakers games with his mom. And apparently, for the band geeks out there, sometimes he plays the trumpet. Or when he's feeling really adventurous or they're feeling really artistic, he plays 3 of them. Well, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, for being, 14, he's really a pretty good looking guy. He's not my type anymore, but he certainly was when I was younger. TV magazine, aside from giving you photographs so that you can idolize this person and really crush hard on them, served another purpose. They told you facts about the person's life. They told you stories, specific ones. For example, I remember a story about Jonathan Taylor Thomas, JTT, as he was commonly referred to as a child. And he was going walking on the beach with his mom and his dog. And they were running through the surf and they were playing. And in my mind, I was right there with him. I was running on the beach, laughing, we were holding hands. I also had my first kiss with Jonathan Taylor Thomas, believe it or not. There was that scene in Tom and Huck when him and Becky Thatcher met lips for like 2 seconds, and that was me. That was my first concept of love. Loving someone who could never love me back. It was a very safe way to love someone, and it was something that could never be tested. Because of course, Jonathan Taylor Thomas lives in Hollywood. So I'm never going to meet him. I never have to test these stories that I'm telling myself. My fantasy stays fantasy, and it still continued to provide me with an incredible rush. The stories that I told myself about Jonathan Taylor Thomas shaped my concepts of love. So eventually I grew up, and I found two things. The first thing I found was boys. They were sitting next to me in my classes. Some of them were really funny, and a few of them were extra cute. I also found dudes in bands, but I'm going to get back to that one later because they continue to be a part of my life. So, middle school. It's middle school, and I picked out the cutest boy in the entire school to have a crush on. For posterity's sake, we're going to call him Joe D. James Dean's younger brother. So obviously he's the winner. Now, I knew where Joe Dean's locker was. My friends and I worked really hard to figure out his class schedule, and I'd oftentimes go out of my way in the hallways to just pass by him during passing period. I'd see him, and every now and then we'd lock eyes. And for me, it was an incredible rush. I couldn't believe it. The object of my affection knew I was alive. But to him, he probably just thought I was this really creepy girl who would stare him down in the hallways. Looking back on it, it's a little bit embarrassing, but it is what it is. So, I spent a good 3 years crushing hard on Joe Dean. I never told him how I felt. And in fact, my friends and I would sit around and we'd tell each other stories about our lives with these guys we were crushing on. The stories in many ways were similar to the stories I told myself with Jonathan Taylor Thomas. They were fantasy. Sure, the object of my affection was real, but I never ever reached out and touched him. Maybe brushed shoulders in the hallway once. But I'm sure that scared me so bad that I never did it again. I'm shy, and you wouldn't guess it because I'll go up and talk to anyone. But if I really like you, I get super nervous. This is something that's plagued me since my childhood. Well, Joe Dean and I, we moved on. We went to separate high schools. And I really never thought about him again until I was writing this. But I can still see him in my mind's eye. The other thing that I discovered in middle school, aside from boys in classes, was boys in bands. Now, that's not a boy in a band. That's the way I felt inside. That's actually the unyielding pain of a young girl who's too shy to talk to a guy she likes. A lot of us have been through it, and I tell you what, it's an incredible suffering. It's the suffering of unrequited love. You've got that object of your affection, and you can't ever have it. I'm sure even though I felt like this on the inside, I looked okay on the outside. It's just a little bit. But, anyways, guys and bands. This is Stabbing Westward, and it was the first band I ever really liked. They were kind of gothy, but they were mostly rock and roll, and so it was a little dark. I could get along with that. The guy in the front, that's Christopher Hall. And I saw this band playing for like a T95 concert over the summer one year. And I was standing in the front with some friends, and Christopher Hall bent down, and he looked me in the eye, and he sang to me. That's all it took. In Denver one time, where my friend and I, must have been 16 at the time, finagled our way onto the tour bus, and sat around and talked to these guys. Now, I can only imagine what they thought, but they were super sweet for entertaining our crushes on them. And Christopher Hall was actually a really smart guy. I remember that night on the tour bus, he looked at me and he said, "Amanda, you're a heartbreaker." It's like, maybe I am. And I probably am, because truth be told, I only like men who are a challenge. I only like Christopher Hall, if you're out there, if you see this, thank you. Because he did change my life, and I really appreciate it. Well, I guess it's probably been 10 years ago now. I really fell into a music scene that I loved. And it's the bluegrass music scene. Now, we don't know any of these guys. And I did that on purpose to protect the identities of the guilty and the innocent. The ones who have been involved and who have not been involved very deeply in my life. So bluegrass, musicians, I love them. They're thoughtful, they're insightful. It's like the one time you'll ever hear a guy talking about his emotions. If you really listen to songs, I'm like, I can't believe it. You're emotional beings. I knew it. Well, there was this one guy in particular. I'm going to call him Bill. The most dorky name you could ever have in the world. Bill Young. Second cousin, twice removed to Neil Young. So you know he's good at his instrument, he's a great songwriter and lyricist, and he is a looker. He was a really dangerous guy for me to fall in love with, and I knew that at the time. He was the kind of guy and he had a girl in every single town he went to. It didn't really bother me too much because when he was with me, he was with me. I was the only one that existed. He lived in a very day-to-day life. I'd see him 3, 4, 5 times a year when the band would come through town, and it was great. It was a mix between fantasy and reality. There were things that anchored our relationship in reality. But then the rest of the time when he was gone, I'd watch videos, I'd see pictures, I'd hear stories, and I would build up this fantasy world. It was really an okay thing. But then a really strange thing happened. I went to a spiritual retreat and I met a shaman, and I took something called ayahuasca. Now, ayahuasca is a vine that grows down in South America. It's a potion that the shamans make. They do a lot of praying over it. And the natives believe that when you ingest ayahuasca, several things happen. First, you have to overcome your own death. So the death of the ego. You no longer have control. You have to give all the control away to this drug. And it takes you places. It allows your spirit to soar. It taught me how to astral travel. It taught me and helped me understand how connected I really am to every other human, even if I am in the skin, and even if we put up tons of barriers. Now, the ayahuasca trip was great. It woke up every cell in my body and reminded every cell in my body that I was very much a part of the world. This was a particularly odd moment in the trip, though. The shaman had just shoved his spirit staff through my third eye, and I was not okay with it. I was resisting it, and I was upset. When something happened, Bill showed up on a riverboat with several of our other friends. They came on a riverboat, rushing into my trip, and saved me. They took me to a place with my family, the people that I love, where I felt safe. Bill's someone I've always felt safe with, and continue to this day. Now, that was fine, and it was good, and it was powerful. But then this really interesting thing started happening. I started dreaming. And I'm not one for lucid dreaming. I can't just make things happen. But because of the way I was raised, I believe in reincarnation. I believe in past lives. I believe in something kind of similar to telepathy, where if I'm thinking about you, you can know that. I believe in that emotional connection between people where you can feel it. Sometimes you can just communicate without words. So Bill kept showing up on my friends, him and several of my other friends. And when they did, sometimes we just go ride bikes, or go to a show, or play mini golf. But there were times that Bill imparted sacred wisdom to me. He taught me things about being human. He saved my life once, quite literally. He got me out of a really bad situation in my waking life. And this really blurred the lines for me between fantasy and reality. I had this life that I lived with Bill when I saw him. And then I had my dream world. It was no longer stories I was making up. It was things that were coming to me in my sleep. And I never told Bill about this. And I think that was maybe where my mistake was. Because if I would have told him, then my fantasy world, my dream world, would have had a basis in reality. But again, I'm shy. I don't like to tell people my real emotions, and I never talked to them about it. And so everything kind of fell apart. It was pretty terrible there for about 3 years. Life situations happened, and I didn't see him for a long time. And during that time, I kept drinking. And by the time I saw him again, I thought, you know what, screw it, I'm ready. I gotta do this. It's what my heart wants. It's what my heart feels. So by the time I was ready, and I showed back up to the scene, my fantasy world no longer matched the reality of the situation. 2 years is a really long time to be away from someone. And it really worked out okay, because Bill had found a girlfriend, he was happy, and it made me have to evaluate what it was that I needed out of this relationship. Now, one of the exercises that I've done when developing characters for stage is to think about the character's wants, their needs, and their desires. Because they need motivation. If you're up on the stage, you need to know what your character's motivation is. Well, I knew what I wanted. I wanted to have filled phases. I know what I desired. I desired to know the deep, dark depths of his soul. I desired to explore whether or not we really have lived in past lives together, whether or not these feelings I have are true. But in the end, what I realized is that all I really needed was him in my life. He's a strong enough figure in my life that I need him to be my friend. I can throw away my wants. I can throw away my desires. Because the thing that is fundamentally important to me is that that man is in my life. Now, I think this is a huge moment for me. And this continues to serve me in my life, in different relationships. Because everybody gets rejected. And it's never really fun. This has continued to serve me in my life. It helped get me over the heartbreak hotel that I experienced when I found out that Bill had a girlfriend, that things were not what I really thought they were. I had laid on my couch, feeling miserable for months. I lost my job, and I lost a really good relationship that I'd been in. All for the love of Bill. All for the fantasy world that didn't really exist. Thankfully, though, laying on my couch, these words came to me. Unrequited love. And I had no idea what it meant at the time. But whatever whispered that into my ear, I'm awfully glad that they did. Because it helped make me who I am today. I no longer want to live in this state of fantasy versus reality. It's good to have your dreams. It's good to have your fantasies. You try to keep them going. So, if I had a takeaway message from this entire thing, it's that you've got to follow your heart. If I would have told Bill how I felt when I felt it, we could have had a conversation. We could have had a shared story together. Now, I don't know if I'll ever tell him the way I felt. Because anymore it doesn't matter. I've been able to move beyond it. But it's made me realize how important it is when you feel something, you do it. You take the jump, you take the leap. Because the heart does not lie. And there's nothing worse than losing your heart. When you forsake your heart and you break your own heart, you have no ground left to stand on. And it's absolutely miserable. I'd say it's taken me 2 years to get to this point where I finally know how to listen again. Really, you've got to do what feels right when you feel it. And you can't lose touch with reality. For me, 2015 is the year of finding balance. Balance between those fantasies and the realities. Because I'm not willing to give my fantasies up. I'm quite joking. But it's also the year of emotional honesty for me. Whether they like it or not. I'm going to tell you how I feel. And hopefully I haven't been thinking about it for too long. Because if I have, it's going to be really,